Sometimes the most terrifying stories don't come from horror movies or ghost tales. Sometimes the scariest thing is what a family becomes behind closed doors. Not because of a monster outside, but because something dark has taken root within them. This isn't just another haunted house story. It's not about jump scares or flickering lights. This is about a real family. Flesh and blood. A mother, a father, their children. People who smiled in photographs, who once laughed around the dinner table, and who slowly unraveled into something unrecognizable. This is the story of the Ashford family. And once you hear it, you might never look at an old house the same way again. Before we go further, I need you to do something. If stories like this grab you, if you feel a chill down your spine when the truth is darker than fiction, then hit that subscribe button right now. Join the ones who don't turn away from the shadows, the ones who want to see what lies beneath. Now let me take you back to the year 1912. Black Hollow was a small, mist-covered village in northern England. Quiet, slow, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. When the Ashford family moved into the grand stone house at the edge of town, people were curious but polite. The house, Ashford Manor they called it, had been empty for years. Some said it was cursed, but most brushed that off as superstition. Old villagers always talk like that. Thomas Ashford, the father, was a wealthy textile merchant. Handsome, clean-shaven, always dressed in black suits with polished shoes. He walked with purpose. His wife, Eleanor, was different. Pale, soft-spoken, and rarely seen without a book in her hands. She had the kind of beauty people whispered about, timeless but cold. Their children, William 11, Grace 8, and Henry only 5, seemed happy enough. Shy maybe, but polite. William especially was quiet, always watching people instead of speaking. Grace had a soft laugh that sometimes echoed through the gardens, and Henry, the youngest, often clung to Eleanor's skirt, peeking out from behind her like he was afraid of the world. In the first weeks, everything seemed normal. The family kept to themselves but waved politely. Thomas attended town meetings, offered donations to the local church, and even helped repair a broken bridge with his workers. People liked him. Eleanor, though, made people uneasy. She rarely spoke and never smiled. Some said she had the eyes of someone who had already seen too much. Then, small things started happening. It began with the pets. A neighbor's dog disappeared. Then another. A cat was found dead under a porch, eyes wide, body stiff. People muttered about foxes, maybe a sickness spreading through the animals. But someone claimed they saw Eleanor in the woods at night, standing still between the trees, barefoot, looking up at the sky and murmuring words that didn't sound like English. No one said anything to her face. Who would? She was a lady of status. But the whispers had begun. Then there were the strange sounds. Visitors to the manor said they heard crying in the walls. One delivery boy ran home in tears, saying he saw a little girl in the upstairs window, banging on the glass with a terrified face. But when Thomas came to check, the room was empty. The window was locked from the inside. People began to keep their distance. Inside the manor, things were not as perfect as they seemed. Thomas grew distant. He spent long hours in the study, reading old letters and maps, muttering to himself. Eleanor stopped going outside. The children were rarely seen anymore. When a local teacher visited to ask why the children had stopped attending school, Eleanor opened the door just wide enough to say, "They're being taught at home now," before shutting it again. The teacher said she heard someone crying upstairs. By late autumn, the villagers had stopped trying to interact. The Ashfords became like shadows, present but never part of the town anymore. Then one day, Grace vanished. It was a bright Sunday morning when it happened. The family had gone for a walk, as they sometimes did, down by the river that ran behind the woods. A few hours later, Thomas came back carrying Henry, who was asleep on his shoulder. Eleanor walked beside him slowly. But Grace was not with them. When asked, Thomas said she must have wandered off. That she was playing by the river and must have slipped away when they weren't looking. A search party formed immediately. The town may have been suspicious, but Grace was a child. Innocent. People searched the woods, the river, the hills beyond. They found one of her shoes near a rock by the water. A torn ribbon. No footprints. No blood. No body. Thomas cried. Truly cried. Neighbors described him shouting her name over and over, collapsing to his knees by the river. He refused to go home for days, sleeping in a tent with the search party. But Eleanor didn't react. Not in the way people expected. She didn't join the search. Didn't ask questions. Didn't cry. She simply sat in Grace's room for hours, staring at the wall. Sometimes whispering to no one. Once, a maid passed by and heard her repeating the same sentence over and over. "She's not gone. She's with her now." She's with her now. The maid quit that night. Grace's disappearance broke something in the house. Whatever fragile piece existed inside Ashford Manor snapped. Henry, the youngest, started wetting the bed. He began to scream in the middle of the night, saying, "The lady in the wall is watching me again." William, once quiet but polite, started drawing strange things, symbols no one recognized. In every drawing there was a shadow. A long, stretched figure with no face. The house itself seemed to change. The air felt heavier. Visitors, what few remained, said they felt dizzy inside. One man claimed the mirrors no longer showed reflections correctly. That when he looked into one he saw himself, but standing still while he turned his head. Soon after, Thomas closed the curtains and locked the gates. The family stopped accepting guests. He told the last housemaid they no longer needed help. That the family needed to focus on each other now. That maid, years later, would say that the last time she saw Eleanor, the woman's eyes were so empty she didn't even look human anymore. Ashford Manor went silent. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means something is building. And in that house, something was building. Something that had taken Grace. Something that had been waiting. And whatever it was, it had only just begun. The search for Grace eventually ended. After weeks of combing through the forest, dragging the river, knocking on doors in nearby towns, there was still no sign of her. No body, no footprints, no torn dress. Just a shoe and a silence that seemed to settle over Ashford Manor like a heavy fog. The town held a small memorial. A priest offered prayers. Some of the villagers brought flowers to the gate, placing them gently outside, unsure if they should ring the bell. The Ashfords never came out. Inside the manor, the family was crumbling. Henry began having nightmares. Every single night. And they weren't normal childhood fears. He'd wake up screaming, clawing at the air, sobbing uncontrollably. He kept saying the same thing again and again. "She's in the walls. Grace is in the walls. She's talking to me." At first, Thomas thought it was grief. Trauma. The boy had lost his sister after all. But then came the drawings. Pages and pages filled with crayon shapes, all showing the same thing. A tall black figure with no eyes, no face, and long arms that stretched from the corners of the room. In every picture, the figure was holding hands with Grace. Eleanor didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she didn't care. She had become something else entirely. She never left her room. She barely ate. When she did speak, it was in strange, quiet whispers, to someone who wasn't there. She talked to the empty chair at the dinner table. She walked the halls at night, barefoot and humming a lullaby no one recognized. And she had a habit now, pressing her ear to the walls as if listening to something. Something deep inside. One night, Thomas followed her. She walked slowly through the house, her white nightgown dragging along the floor, candle in hand. He watched from the shadows. She stopped at the end of the upstairs hallway, pressed her palm against the wall and whispered, "I hear you. I know what you want." He didn't sleep that night. A few days later, William stopped speaking. The boy hadn't been very talkative before, but now he went completely silent. He wouldn't answer questions. Wouldn't eat unless food was placed directly in front of him. He didn't even react when Henry screamed in the night. One evening, Thomas found William sitting in the attic, staring at a blank wall. Carved into the wood behind him were strange marks, symbols, circles, stars with lines through them, and what looked like a face with no mouth. When Thomas tried to erase them, the boy screamed. Loud. Unnatural. It was the only sound he'd made in days. That was when Thomas started locking the attic door. The town had almost forgotten about the Ashfords by then. Months had passed. Grace was a ghost in memory now, a quiet topic people avoided out of respect, or fear. Most people assumed the family was grieving, broken, or just plain mad. But then the maid came back. Her name was Mary Whitlock. She had worked for the Ashfords before Grace disappeared. She was 17 when she left, terrified and shaken after finding Eleanor whispering to herself in a mirror one night. But now she returned, not out of loyalty or forgiveness, but because she had nowhere else to go. Her mother was sick. Her father had lost his job. The Ashfords still had money. She needed it. When she returned, she said the house was cold, not in temperature but in feeling. She said there were rooms that felt wrong. Like something was watching her, even when she was alone. She lasted only 11 days. In that short time, she wrote in her diary every night. That diary would later be found and used in the police report. And what she wrote would leave people speechless. She wrote that Eleanor never spoke to her. Not once. That Eleanor would sit in Grace's old room, brushing her hair with an invisible brush, singing songs in a strange language. That Henry never laughed anymore. That William was chained to his bed at night, not by Thomas but by his own request. To keep her out, he had whispered. Mary claimed the entire family gathered in the dining room at exactly 9:06 every night. No food on the table, just candles. They held hands. They closed their eyes. And in the empty chair where Grace used to sit, sometimes the candle flickered. Sometimes it went out. And once, she swore she saw a faint handprint on the wooden surface of the table. A small hand. A child's hand. The final entry in Mary's diary said, "I heard Eleanor say the words again. The ones she whispers when no one's around. I wrote them down, Serapha Lundra Tenebris. Open the door." I don't know what it means. But William looked at me today. He stared into my eyes and said, "You should leave. She doesn't like you. I'm leaving tomorrow morning." Mary never made it out. Her body was found 3 days later in the woods. No wounds. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Her shoes were gone. Her eyes were open. She looked like she had died in the middle of a scream. The town was horrified. But no one said it was the Ashfords. Not openly. There was no proof. Thomas told the constable that Mary had left on her own. That she packed a small bag and walked toward the train station. The police had no reason to doubt him. But people stopped going near the manor. Not because of guilt, but because of fear. Rumors spread like fire. People claimed they heard wailing at night. Others said they saw a girl, barefoot, dressed in white, standing at the edge of the Ashfords' garden, mouth open, eyes empty. Some said Grace had come back. In the middle of all this, Eleanor changed again. She started painting. All day, all night. Canvases filled with strange, surreal images. Twisting black trees, children with no eyes, staircases leading into mouths. One painting showed their family, sitting at the dining table. But there were only shadows where the faces should be. Except one, Grace's. Her face was normal. Smiling. And above her head, something was floating. Something with horns. Thomas locked those paintings in the cellar. No one ever saw them again. By the end of the year, Henry fell ill. He wasn't eating. Wouldn't speak. Wouldn't move from his bed. Doctors came and went, offering no answers. They said he looked fine physically, but that something had shut down inside him. He died one morning just before Christmas. Peacefully, they said. As if he simply gave up. Eleanor didn't attend the funeral. Thomas buried his son alone. William stood beside him, silent and still. That night, neighbors claimed they heard laughter from the attic. Childlike laughter. And then, silence. Ashford Manor had claimed another life. But it wasn't finished yet. Whatever was living in that house, whatever had taken Grace, whatever Eleanor had welcomed into her heart, it was still there. Growing stronger. Feeding off the pain. Waiting. And what happened next would prove that no one, not even the ones who thought they had control, was safe from what lived inside the walls of Ashford Manor. The village fell into silence. After Henry's death, no one visited Ashford Manor. Not friends, not doctors, not even the priest who once said a blessing over Grace's lost body. Something had shifted in the air. Something cold. People crossed the road to avoid walking too close to the iron gates. Children dared each other to touch the stone walls, then ran away screaming. Inside the house, the Ashford family had grown smaller, but the shadows had grown larger. Thomas, once a proud and well-dressed man, was no longer seen in the village. He let his business rot. His money dried up. The garden went wild. The windows were blacked out with heavy cloth. It was as if he had sealed the house off from the world, not to protect them but to keep something in. He stopped speaking to neighbors. Stopped replying to letters. For all anyone knew, the Ashfords had vanished. But those who walked by at night, they knew better. They heard things. Thuds. Screams. Music sometimes. A piano playing from deep inside the house, even though no one had touched it in years. William was rarely seen. When he did appear, peeking through a curtain, staring through a cracked window, people said his eyes were different. Older. Like he had seen something no child should ever have to witness. One boy claimed he climbed a tree near the edge of the manor grounds and looked into the attic window. What he saw haunted him for years. William was sitting in the middle of a chalk circle, surrounded by candles. Chains were wrapped around his ankles, real chains, not pretend ones, and symbols were scratched into the wooden floor. But what disturbed the boy most wasn't the chains or the drawings. It was the look on William's face. He was smiling, but his eyes were full of terror. Whatever he was doing, he wasn't doing it willingly. Thomas must have known something was wrong. He must have sensed what was happening to his family. But instead of seeking help, he dug deeper. He spent all day in the basement. One night, Neighbors said they saw smoke pouring from the chimney, but not wood smoke. Something darker. A strange, metallic smell drifted into the air. Then, in the summer of 1916, Thomas Ashford disappeared. No warning. No goodbye. One day he simply wasn't there. Eleanor told the constables he had left for a business trip to London. But the police checked the station. No ticket. No train. No one had seen him leave. And there was something even stranger. His boots were still in the front hall. His coat was still on the rack. His favorite silver watch was still on the nightstand beside the bed. It was as if he had walked into another room and never returned. Some say Eleanor killed him. Some say he ran away, unable to face what his family had become. But others believe something else happened. Something that began long ago, maybe even before Grace disappeared. Something that was now taking them one by one. William was alone now. Alone with Eleanor. And she was no longer a mother. Not in the way people understand it. She had become something else. Something colder than grief. She had gone completely silent. Not mute. Just silent by choice. She moved like a shadow through the house. She stopped sleeping in a bed. Instead, she lay curled up on the stone floor in the old nursery, where Henry had once slept, and where Grace's toys still sat collecting dust. One night, someone heard chanting from the manor. Low, guttural sounds that didn't belong to any known language. Another night, a passerby said he saw Eleanor in the front yard, standing in the rain, holding something in her hands. When he came closer, she turned slowly and vanished. That was the last time anyone in the village saw her. After that, the manor was sealed shut. No lights, no movement, no sound. But still, people claimed the house wasn't empty, that they could feel it watching, listening, alive. One young constable, just 22 years old and new to the village, was dared by his friends to knock on the Ashfords' door. It was a foggy evening. His friends waited at the edge of the drive as he walked up and knocked 3 times. Nothing happened. He laughed and turned to walk back. Then the door creaked open. He didn't go in. He swore on his life that he didn't. But he peeked through the crack, and what he saw chilled him to his bones. The house was pitch dark, except for a single candle at the end of the hallway. Sitting next to the flame was a child's doll. And beside it, bare feet. Small ones. Just standing there. Still. He couldn't see a face. Couldn't tell if it was real. But then the candle went out. And the door slammed shut. He ran all the way back without saying a word. After that night, no one went near the house again. Years passed. The world changed. A war came and went. But Ashford Manor remained, untouched, unclaimed, and unspoken of. Families moved in and out of Black Hollow, but no one dared to buy the manor. Even the government left it alone. Too much history. Too many unanswered questions. It wasn't until 1920 that the house was opened again. A foul odor had begun leaking from the property. A smell of rotting wood, wet earth, and something worse, something like spoiled meat. The villagers finally contacted the authorities. 2 constables were sent to investigate. What they found inside would be talked about in hushed voices for decades. The house was a grave. Dust coated everything. Furniture had rotted. Wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. Rats had made homes inside broken drawers. But it was the attic that held the real horror. They found William's body curled in the corner. He had wasted away to nearly nothing, skin stretched over bone, eyes sunken. But his expression was peaceful. He was smiling, as if death had finally given him rest. Beside him was a journal. The last few pages were written in jagged, shaking handwriting. In one entry he wrote, "She comes every night. She says Grace is still hungry. She says I'm the last." The final entry, dated just 2 days before they found his body, said, "I can't stay awake any longer. I see her when I close my eyes now. Not Grace. The one Grace brought. She said if I let her in she'll stop. But I don't believe her." There was no mention of Eleanor. No body. No trace. Just a silver hairbrush left in the nursery. And the faint smell of lavender in the air. They searched the grounds. Dug up parts of the garden. Open walls. But no sign of her. Some believe she fled into the forest and never returned. Others believe she was taken by whatever force she had allowed into their lives. But some say she never left at all. Today, Ashford Manor still stands. No one has lived there in over 100 years. Nature has taken much of it back. Ivy crawling over stone, trees leaning against the roof, the front gate rusted and broken. But those who live nearby still speak in whispers. They say on quiet nights, you can hear the faint sound of children laughing. Or a lullaby carried on the wind. Sometimes you see a flicker of candlelight in the attic. or the shadow of a girl watching from the window. They say Grace still waits, and what she brought with her still feeds. Years passed. The story of the Ashfords faded slowly, like fog after a storm. Some people left Black Hollow, too afraid to stay near the manor. Others stayed but refused to speak of what had happened. The manor itself stood still, rotting slowly in silence, its broken windows staring blankly out like dead eyes. But the truth never really disappeared. It just sank deeper. And those who still remembered, they never forgot the feeling. That weight in the air when you walked past the gates. That sense of being watched from somewhere within the walls. In 1937, a writer named Lawrence Kent came to the village. He had heard the rumors. Ghost stories. Witchcraft. Madness. He wanted to write a book about it, uncover the truth, separate fact from fiction. People warned him not to go near the manor. But he laughed. Called it rural superstition. He stayed in Black Hollow for 6 weeks. Interviewed locals. Read old newspapers. Found pieces of Mary's diary and police reports. The village had buried the story, but the documents were still there, hidden in old church boxes, folded between census records. Then Lawrence did what no one else dared. He went inside. He broke the lock on the gate, walked up the stone path, pushed open the warped wooden door and stepped into the heart of the story. What happened next was never fully explained. He returned the next morning, barefoot, covered in dirt and silent. He had scratches on his arms and back as if he'd clawed his way through something tight. His notebook was gone. His eyes were wide, staring, unblinking. He didn't say a word for 2 days. When he finally spoke, all he said was, "She's still there. She never left. She's waiting." He left the village that night and never came back. No book was ever published. Years later, someone found a single page from his missing notebook. It was wedged behind a radiator in the inn where he had stayed. The words on it were written in messy, uneven letters. "There's a door in the cellar. A door that wasn't built by hands. I heard her. She was singing. And Grace was crying. But they weren't alone." After that, Ashford Manor was officially declared condemned. The local council ordered a perimeter fence built around it. No one fought the decision. No one wanted to go near it anyway. But the strange sightings continued. In the 1950s, 2 boys snuck in on a dare. They were 12, armed with flashlights and a camera. They made it to the attic. Saw the symbols still etched into the floor. The chains. The bed frame. And the journal, still there, still stained with age, the last pages barely legible. One of the boys took a photo. The other touched one of the chalk symbols. He collapsed instantly. Seizure. Foaming at the mouth. His friend dragged him out of the house, screaming. The boy survived, but never spoke again. Not even to his parents. The photograph developed perfectly. Except, standing in the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. A girl. With long dark hair. Head tilted. Smiling. And behind her, 2 glowing eyes. The image was shown to police, then buried in an archive. It was labeled a hoax and the manor was sealed once more. But legends like this don't die. They evolve. Some say the Ashford family was cursed, that Eleanor had dabbled in something ancient, that her obsession with old books and whispers in the walls led her to open a door she could never close. Others believe Grace was the key, that something took her first, body or soul, and used her as a path into our world, that she became the voice in Henry's dreams, the hand in the attic, the song in Eleanor's mind. But a small few, think it was the house itself, that the land was wrong, that the foundation was built on something older than time. And the Ashfords? They were just unlucky enough to move in. In 1986, a group of paranormal investigators got permission to spend 1 night inside Ashford Manor. They went in with gear, cameras, recorders, motion sensors. 5 of them total. Professionals, they said. Only 1 came out. She was found wandering the woods the next morning, barefoot, whispering to herself in a mix of English and something else. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her fingernails torn. When medics tried to treat her, she screamed, "Don't touch me. She's under my skin." The footage from the cameras was mostly static. But 1 clip remained. 32 seconds. The group is standing in the basement, speaking quietly. Then the sound cuts. The camera jerks. A scream. A flash of movement. And a voice, young, female, distant, singing a lullaby. Then nothing. No one speaks of the Ashfords anymore in Black Hollow. The manor still stands. Weeds have claimed most of the walls. Ivy has crushed several windows. The fence is broken. The gate has rusted open. But no one goes in. Not because of law. Not because of warnings. but because the story has changed. Now, it's said that those who enter don't always die, but something leaves with them. A sickness, a whisper, a shadow in the corner of their room, a child's laughter in the night. One woman who moved into a nearby cottage claimed she saw Eleanor in her dreams, standing at the foot of her bed, holding Grace's hand. She said the girl spoke to her. She told me she's hungry. She told me the house is still feeding. She told me, I'll be next. She moved away 2 days later, and the house remains, still, silent, waiting. What happened to the Ashfords isn't just a story. It's a warning. A reminder that evil doesn't always arrive with a roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's a smile in a photograph. A closed door at the end of the hallway. A lullaby sung at night to a child who isn't there. If you ever find yourself in the north of England, near Black Hollow, and you see a crumbling stone manor with a twisted iron gate, don't go in. Not even to look. Because the door is still there. And so is she. And once she notices you, she might follow you home.